out any permitted artificial reef in the state of Florida in the past decade, and you can bet that Dr. Hayward Matthews was involved in selecting the site. Dr. Matthews is a biological oceanographer, and every year teaches oceanography to 700 students at St. Petersburg Junior College on the Clearwater campus. For the past 11 years, he was the head of the Sea Grant Artificial Reef Resource Team. What were your responsibilities with this team?
Well, basically I was a resource person for the marine agents of Florida Sea Grant. So when they had a problem with an artificial reef or needed a new site, then they would contact their local marine agent, who would in turn contact me. Then I would travel over to the area. We would go out then and help them select the site. We would do the permit applications, check the bottom, make sure it was suitable, things of that sort. Then if later they had a problem with the reef, then again they would contact the marine agent, and he would contact me to come back and give them assistance.
Matthews says he's worked with just about every coastal county in Florida.
Starting from Pensacola and all the way down the Gulf Coast, all the way down to the Keys, and then going from the Keys in Miami all the way up to Fernandina Beach. So there's hardly a county in the entire coastal part of the state that hasn't called at one time or another for us to come and help them either with their site selection or help them work with evaluating an existing reef.
Five days a week, this 60-foot barge called the Tortuga leaves the shores of Pinellas County, carrying 30 to 35 tons of concrete materials to the county's 11 artificial reef sites. The crew includes a program supervisor, a barge captain, a head diver, and 2 reef technicians, as well as a crane operator. The crew primarily sinks concrete culvert and concrete cut-off piling materials the county pays nothing for.
Pinellas County is very fortunate that any companies that do construction work for the county, the material that they pull out, let's say if they're replacing water, concrete, culvert, pipe, instead of being, having to take it to the dump and paying $37, $40 a ton disposal fee, they're able to donate it and deliver it to our reef site free of charge. They save money there, and we gain material to build our artificial reefs. Very, very useful, working relationship.
I look at it as something that is helping to better the community. I mean, we're taking discards and using it to create things that are beneficial instead of things that are unsightly and cluttering up the landfills and taking up more space.
Reef builders say concrete makes excellent reef material because it's going to be around for hundreds of years to come. Materials not used include wood because of its tendency to break up and cause navigational hazards. Peacock says other items the county won't sink include tires, old refrigerators and washing machines, and cars.
The problem with white goods and automobiles is they involve such extensive cleanup to remove. With automobiles, all the grease-laden parts, the oil in the engine, and with white goods you have the fiberglass insulation, which once entered to the marine environment would be very toxic. So the cleanup that is needed to assure that those would be safe on the bottom, it's just not worth it. And also, from my standpoint, there's an aesthetic, factor and a realistic factor. We're trying to build structures that maximize fisheries production, fisheries habitat, and those materials are they're dinosaurs, they're antiquated.
Even though Pinellas County has constructed artificial reefs for the past 11 years, Peacock says they're still in the learning process about what makes good fisheries habitat. So they've concentrated on doing a good job on just a few reefs rather than a lot.
Instead of going out and expanding and just putting material down everywhere, we're limiting our construction. And as I mentioned earlier, our method of construction is very slow and methodical. And what we're doing is we're trying to answer some of these basic research questions, spacing between structure, profile height, fish dynamics on these structures. So what we want to do is work what we have and analyze what we have before we go into expanding, the scope of our program.
This slide area here represents a cluttered area, and there's quite a variety of material that was placed in there in years past. But more specifically,
the key to successful reef construction may lie in good record keeping.
We know when it specifically that the material was placed there. We can tell whether it's been down there a year, 2 years, 3 years, or however long. We can tell how well it's doing or how poor it's doing. And that way we can also check on the stabilization of it, how the storms have affected the sites.
And how are they doing?
We've had cases where we put down a pile of culvert, went back the very next day, and had 200 or 300 pounds of grouper living in the culvert literally overnight. So when you put one down, particularly in an area where there's not much natural habitat, then it acts almost like a magnet and it draws the fish to it very quickly. Now, the fish you've drawn to it right at the start have really been at the expense of natural areas around there. But then 2 or 3 years down the road, those natural areas will have regained their fish population from juveniles recruited out of the plankton, and the artificial reef will have built up even a larger population.
Researchers with the Florida Sea Grant program with the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences are currently taking inventory of existing artificial reef sites in the state, and they're waiting on funding to pay for the creation of a statewide database. The information will include everything from size and materials to reef performance and future construction plans. The information will be available to all counties wanting to create new life under the sea. I'm Donna Green-Townsend reporting for Florida File.